Welcome to the Best Half Show, the show all about the biggest idea in the world, which is that your second half of your life could be 10 times better than your first. And also big because we are the #1 standing podcast in the world. And why do we stand?
Because sitting is the new smoking.
Exactly. We can burn a bunch of calories just standing up doing our podcast. So we like to...
And we hope that you are listening to our podcast, maybe going for a walk, maybe exercising, because we really believe that health is really wealth. Yeah.
And I mean, take a step back and say, why are we even doing this show? We've done a few of these now. We've not really said a little bit about our philosophy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. We were inspired by the fact that the second half of our life has been greater than our first half. And we believe that the second half of our life can be literally 10x better. So we are really, we're disciplined and we're focused on making that true in every aspect of our life. And I know in our first season, we've been really focused on health because if you don't have health, it all falls apart. Yeah. But we're focused on health and our relationships and our families and all the different categories. And obviously, the economy and wealth, and we'll talk about that today. But we believe that the second half of your life can be 10x better. And we're here to document our journey in that process.
One thing that is great is you go back to the first episode and people have remarked, for example, like how different I look. I'm probably about 20 pounds lighter, right? So a lot of things have gone better for me since starting this. I think originally why I was interested in it is that I saw a vision for how our lives could be 10 times better. It wasn't the case when we started. So I'm making more money now. I'm in better shape. My relationships are much, much better than they were. So I think it's actually pretty cool that while we are learning more about this, you're right, we're documenting our journey. We're learning more about success in all of these spheres, and we can share everything that we've learned about it.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I mean, every time we wake up in the morning, we've got these like mental, negative thoughts. It's like, hey, getting up at 5 a.m, like it's hard, but like we're doing it. I know that you didn't like F45, but I got you into it. Yeah. You've got me into the intermittent fasting and some more. I'm doing more weights now than I've ever done.
That's great.
But it's translated in other parts of my life. Like I think I mentioned to you last week. I got a phone call from my daughter, and she's like, "Dad, can we spend Father's Day weekend together in New York?" And I'm like, "Wow." And then my son just told me this week, "Hey, Dad, can we go to Europe? Can we just spend a couple weeks together?" And I'm like, wow, like these are just like magic things I've been dreaming about my whole life, and they start happening. And I think sometimes you don't correlate the getting up at 5 a.m. or the daily workout or doing the hard thing every day, but those things translate in every aspect of our life, and that's the cool part.
Yeah, no, there's a concept called the keystone habit, and that's why even with my clients, the first thing when their life's a mess, the first thing is always get into the gym, right? It's a keystone habit, that discipline that you have to have in order to go and work out daily does indeed translate into other aspects of your life, right? So yeah, actually, there's a few keystone habits that we're going to get into, but I think today we're going to talk about something. Probably it's a really big picture thing. It's something that I'm passionate about. I think it's really important.
It's really
because
important.
It's a big thing that is going to happen. I mean, not just in our lifetime, but probably within the next few years, and some people even say the next few months. And that's the death of the dollar. Right?
Yes.
The US dollar absolutely has an expiration date. We don't know exactly when it is, but nothing can grow exponentially forever as it's been doing. Every other fiat currency that's ever been created has died.
Yes.
And now the conditions are really in place for it to go soon. And it's a huge threat, I think, but it's also a massive opportunity. In every crisis, there is opportunity if you're prepared.
Yes.
And so I really want our audience to start preparing for what I believe is inevitable.
Yes.
We don't know how bad the situation is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be a transition that's going to take like 2 weeks and then there's going to be something new, or if it's going to be something much bigger where there's, a year plus of like pretty severe dislocation before things get back to normal.
So Mark, before we get into the topic, so I've been following Ray Dalio ever since COVID started, and Ray Dalio has been predicting this for a long time. For those of you that don't know Ray Dalio, one of the greatest hedge fund managers of all time, actually has the largest private hedge fund in the world, always consistently been in the top 100 richest people in the world, one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. So he's a pretty smart guy. So he's been predicting this for a while. He's been talking about this at the end of the dollar. And I had the opportunity to see Jeff Rubin, my favorite economist. He has a new book called The Map of the New Normal, also echoing some of these ideas. But this is really important because you'll never see this stuff in the headlines. So the media, what we're going to talk about today, you're not going to see this anywhere else. I promise you that with the information we're going to share with you, it's profound. We got some first principles thinking, and you are not going to see this information anywhere else. So there's your intro, Mark.
It's just interesting, right? Because on one level, it's so predictable based on every other empire that's ever come before. Like I remember when I was at Queen's in 1992, and I picked up a book called The Rise and Fall of the American Empire, right, by a professor named Kennedy. Like it's so obvious that the U.S. is even back then. So even in the 80s and 90s, the U.S. was already in significant decline already. So it's actually so predictable, but at the same time, because nothing bad has happened. Well, there's been a few things, but nothing catastrophic's happened in the last 20, 30 years. Like I think people just get complacent and think things can always be this way.
Right.
But you look at every other, and that's what Ray Dalio has done in his work, is look at really every other empire that's come before: the Greeks, the Romans, the Spanish, the Dutch, the English, the
British,
whatever. Right. And the American order is not fundamentally that different from what has come before. And all the signs are there, Ray Dalio points to, whether it's cultural degradation, massive inflation, military overextension, most important of all, massive, exponential rises in debt that cannot even be tapered. Like, never mind paid off.
Right.
It can't even be tapered.
Yes.
It's built into the very architecture of the way the debt works.
Yes.
So, nothing can go up forever. Right. All the signs are there. What some people are saying is, but if you look at what Ray Dalio is saying, there needs to be another empire that takes over. Right. And you say, well, you look at China and it just doesn't look like it's the thing. I think people should not focus on that.
Yes.
The fact is that the current system cannot continue the way it is, and something needs to replace it. And I think it's that I want to talk about, sort of some of the things that we're doing to prepare, and what other people can do to prepare.
Good.
About it.
And in terms of Jeff Rubin's talk that I attended in his book, he does believe that China actually will be become the new reserve currency. So again, we're not here to debate who's going to be in charge, but we know that there's a decline of the U.S. You can't print $1 trillion every 100 days and not have massive inflation. You've got Larry Summers, former Fed chief, president of Harvard, saying our real inflation rate's 18% a year, because if you add borrowing costs, that's really what we're dealing with. And this is not sustainable. So that's what we're going to get into.
No, and we can start with there. Like, I've been sort of watching these lurid videos the last couple of weeks of basically Gen Z people. These are typically young women, 21, 22, just exasperated, saying, how on earth can anybody live? Like, never mind getting a house. I know I'm never going to get a house.
Right.
How do people eat?
Yes.
Right?
How do you survive?
Because I have whatever it is. I've got a 4-year degree, and I'm making $16 an hour, and it's the best that I could possibly do.
Yes.
How does anybody, live on that? So the truth is that we are in stagflation. You've got an economy that is in decline. It's kind of being masked by some of the improvements that AI is bringing to the table. You look at the U.S. stock market's actually been in decline for months. It's NVIDIA and other AI companies that are just basically holding the full thing up. Yeah. And even Meta and Google, whatever, really it's AI that's driving a lot of their profit these days.
But today on the drive here, did you notice, we drove under the Gardiner Expressway. Did you notice how many homeless people? Did you notice how many tents? I mean, we're becoming a tent city. These aren't just statistics that we read in, economic books. You just drive around Toronto. You go to you see parks. Literally, there's homeless right beside the Boulevard Club, the club that we belong to. Right next door to the Boulevard Club, there's a fence. And I keep saying this same couple and this big tent, they live there.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what's happening right now, because you can't live in a city where the average rent starts at $3,000 a month and pay people even at $20 an hour. You can't pay your rent with that.
Yeah. So we're already in stagflation, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing that happened in the 1970s. The difference is in the 1970s, they were able to raise interest rates to 21% and make the dollar valuable again. There's no way anything like that can happen again. Like, everybody's going bankrupt. Even at current interest rates, which have been high for pretty long, relatively high. A
few years.
Since COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, bankruptcies are really increasing pretty rapidly
they're
now.
All-time highs.
Yeah, and I mean, not high enough, I think, for the central bank to decrease it. But yeah, we're already in an untenable kind of period. And the only reason why things aren't falling apart is because of debt, right? So I think both Canadians, Americans, I mean, really all over the world, they're increasing their personal debt levels, but we're probably right at the limit now.
The breaking point. We're at the breaking point.
Because the same interest rate that was 18% 3 years ago is now 30.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Credit card rates, for example.
Credit card debt
off the charts.
is insane, right? Yeah. So I think we're actually getting pretty close to the breaking point right now. So we're already there in terms of some significant stagflation that's happening.
But what's interesting is when you read the media, so you watch television or read the paper, they say, oh, inflation went down, it's only 4%.
Yeah.
Like you get these statistics. But we pulled up a chart the other day about just the Big Mac pricing, right? And this is really interesting. Do you want to just talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Big Mac index has been used for years as a way to look at purchase price parity. So look at how expensive different economies are around the world and what the value of their currency is. But yeah, like so McDonald's basically knows how to price things properly. Basically, is the answer. So, I mean, I think their average price is up, like it's well over 100% in just a few years. Right?
Yeah.
So
end
of 2019. Yeah. So some things
like
this
one. We're going to put this on the screen.
The McChicken has gone up from $1.29 to $3.89. So 202% increase. The cheeseburger is up from $1 to $3.15, 215%. Interestingly, the Big Mac is not up as much. So clearly McDonald's is making some sort of a strategic decision that their cheapest things on the menu, they've actually they don't want to make them as affordable anymore.
Hey, are you 40 plus and maybe been successful in your business or successful in your career, but it's not where you thought it could be? Maybe your relationship is not as great as it could be, or maybe you look in the mirror and not super proud of what's happened. Mark and I have been very successful building some billion-dollar businesses, and we believe that the second half of your life can be 10x better than your first half. We believe you can have more fun, more social relationships, better health, and take your business to the next level. That's what the Best Half Show is about, and we hope you join us on the Best Half Show. Well, Mark, let's think about this. So again, I've got 3 teenagers, and I don't know what's like at your house, but my kids love McDonald's. And I noticed just myself, like I couldn't believe how much we're spending in the drive-thru.
I can't believe you let your kids eat that stuff.
Listen, I'm a vegetarian. There's nothing I can eat at McDonald's. Like literally nothing. But anyways, sometimes you want some peace in your house. But look at this. So out of the 5 most common items at McDonald's in the last 4 years, they're up 141%. Yeah. Mark, is anyone making 141% more money they were 4 years ago?
Definitely not.
This is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of a less expensive restaurant than McDonald's, and it's up 141% on the average items in 4 years.
Yeah.
This just gives you an idea of the real, this 4% inflation, this is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit.
And it's been bullshit for years. So there's a great website called shadowstats.com. There's an economist, John Williams, and all he's done is just calculate inflation the way they used to, like in the Bill Clinton era and then before that. So the 1980s way of doing it, 1990s way of doing it. There's all this bullshit that they use. They use something called, for example, hedonic pricing. So they say, well, our televisions are better quality than they were 10 years ago. So we're going to add a factor so that we're going to say that because the television is higher quality, we're going to lower its price, even though the price is not lower.
Yes.
So there's all these bullshit factors. Last month, so the price of chocolate has skyrocketed because the price of cocoa is like gone to the moon. They just decided to take chocolate out.
Right.
We don't need, people don't need the chocolate anymore.
Yeah.
So, we'll keep that in there.
My favorite one is in 1983 to decide to take out borrowing costs. So think about housing. Yeah. Well, when you take out the mortgage, your mortgage, which is probably your biggest expense, or how about your car payment? When you take out borrowing costs, they took that out. So the real inflation is according to Larry Summers, 18% a year, but yet the government's trying to convince us it's like 4 or 5%. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 8 and 20% higher than it is. And anybody who buys food regularly, like I do all the grocery shopping, and so I know it's quite a bit more expensive. I was joking. I'm in an investor group, and I was joking a couple of years ago, and I was right. I says, I'm probably going to make more money just buying a lot of steak and sticking it in my freezer than any stock that
probably
I buy.
The best investment.
And it was probably true.
The best investment,
Those T-bones that I bought for $7 are like $28 now.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's true.
Yeah, no, and that's actually one of the strategies in high inflation. One of the things that people do is that they they buy more than they need, which contributes to inflation even more. As everybody is buying, like, don't buy one pair of shoes, buy three.
Yeah.
Because you know that as long as your feet aren't growing, you know you're going to need to have another pair next year.
Yeah.
You know it's going to be way more expensive next year.
Can I give an example about real estate? Because I know we're all very focused on food and something we think about all the time. But when the currencies, when the governments are printing $1 trillion every 100 days, people don't understand that all these assets are inflated. The prices go higher. And it's not that the asset really is worth more. It's your dollar became worth less. Right. So when your dollar is worth 20% less than it was a year before, 2 years before, that's really what's going on. People aren't doing that calculation.
Yeah. People think in terms of dollar. They don't think in terms of, you know, like if they look at Bitcoin going up or gold going up, what she's really saying is the US dollar is going down with respect to those things.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing we should probably talk about a little bit is why is this happening? Because for many years, so I don't know, it was like 25 years, there was lots of money printing back then too. There's more now.
Nowhere near.
There's now. So I think there's a couple things that have happened. Number one, the whole COVID scamdemic thing, where they helicoptered money and gave it to people. So they never did that before.
Yeah, in the U.S. is about, so just because I saw the stats on this. So Trump, during that, was about $6.8 trillion. Before COVID, he went 5% higher than Obama's deficit. Yeah. But during COVID, they went crazy and the 6.8 trillion. But the problem with that was after he left, Biden came in when the economy was actually was actually doing well, and Biden came in with another 7 trillion that they didn't need to stimulate. Like one bill alone was $2 trillion and an economy that was already growing. Like crazy. This has never happened before.
Yeah. Well, it has, though. I mean, maybe
during
not
wartime.
So maybe not that much. Exactly. And the great financial crisis, whatever. So here's the big difference, though, right? So the great financial crisis, they printed a huge amount of money for the economy at the time, and inflation rates didn't really budge. The reason why is it all went to the banks, and the banks didn't have anyone really to lend to, and people didn't really want to borrow. So the money just stayed there. The velocity of money went way down. What happened now is so different. Not just the United States, happened everywhere. Happened here, right? I got $40,000 loan from the government.
Yeah.
$40,000 for that. I got checks for $2,000 for what? Just existing. Yeah. So people got all this. I call it's helicopter money. Right. But Ben Bernanke who's a former Fed chairman, says, you know, unless we start distributing money from helicopters, the inflation rate doesn't really go up because people don't actually have the money to spend.
Right.
So what happened that was totally different, that's never really happened before, is that the governments around the world all decided it'd be a great idea to go in a helicopter and rain down money to everybody. And what are they going to do? They're going to spend it. And that's why you see it in things like food.
Right.
Why do we see it in things like McDonald's McChickens?
Yes.
It's because you have ordinary people that have all of a sudden more cash to spend, and they're going to spend it. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing that's really a huge thing, and Jeff Rubin talked about it, along with others, is deglobalization. And this is huge.
This is huge.
So for 20 plus years, you had China that was just taking down the price of everything.
Yes.
You go to Walmart and the price of clothes continues to
or you went to
increase.
H&M or we all got spoiled with like really cheap clothing and cheap everything, cheap TVs, cheap computers got cheaper and cheaper because of China.
Yeah, for China. China, and then even when China got expensive, it went to Bangladesh and Vietnam and Cambodia or wherever else.
Yeah.
Right. So globalization was this like massive force that brought down the price of everything. But that has now stopped. So during COVID, you had supply chain screw ups.
Right.
And now you have something that's actually really scary, which is the world is turning into blocks again. Yes. Just like Cold War, where you had like Soviet Union, whatever. So now you've got China and Russia are de facto allied. I just saw a video of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin hugging like they're best friends.
Yes.
Totally, you know, collaborating on every aspect of their economies.
Yep.
They're starting to, they trade with each other in yuan and rubles. India, which historically is not a big fan of China, but you know, they know where things are going, and they're at least on economic issues. It's funny because they still fight in Kashmir. They fight literally with sticks. That's the rule. It's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah.
They're not allowed guns. They're only allowed sticks and stones.
Interesting.
It's hilarious. Yeah. So they still like skirmish a little bit, but they are collaborating, and they're using their own currencies more and more and more. So China now has got a third of that.
Why? So let's go back to why, because Jeff Rubin talks about this. He says it's the economic sanctions that have backfired.
Right,
so
totally,
when Russia invaded Ukraine, So they got together and said, okay, how do we punish Russia? We'll do economic sanctions, but it's backfired. Russian economy's booming right now. The ruble's booming. Like all of these economic sanctions have actually backfired against the US.
Yeah. So the US, which is, I mean, think about it. The US dollar is backed by the might of the great America. Their military's failing. Their soft power is failing. No one's watching Disney anymore. Okay. Their military is failing everywhere. You got F-35s falling out of the sky. And their financial, their SWIFT system, people are just making an end run around it.
Right.
Whether it's using their own currencies, using Bitcoin, using gold.
Yeah.
So they're looking increasingly toothless. And so that's really bad news for the US dollar, right? So the might of the United States is being discounted. Countries are going kind of their own way. And China and Russia both have done a great job of building their own national economies, like their own demand. So more and more, they don't need to go to sell to the US in return for useless dollars, which are literally nothing.
Yes.
Right? It's backed by nothing. They're like, why do we need nothing? The only reason why they've needed it in the past is they needed to keep their people employed. So China is very afraid of unemployment, as they should. Right? As soon as Chinese people get hungry, they get mad at Beijing. They don't want that. So China's going slowly but surely. Like every month, they're doing another deal. Last month, they did a deal with Argentina. They're buying all their like soybeans in return for yuan. Slowly but surely. One day, they're going to pull the trigger. And it may come closer than people think. I mean, look what's going on in Taiwan right now. Taiwan is completely surrounded by Chinese naval and air force. It's an exercise, but what happens with exercise is it's a test run for what's going to happen in the future. So it really looks like China is getting to the point where they may pull the plug together. And there's a good reason for them in Russia to pull the plug. Again, they're being threatened big time.
Right.
So that's going to take the inflation we have now and is just going to make it go supernova.
Exactly.
When you look at what hyperinflation is, it's more than just rapid inflation. Like what hyperinflation is when people just lose all confidence in a currency. You just know prices are just going to go up forever. I'm going to buy 3 pairs of shoes, not 1 pair of shoes. I'm going to buy 10 steaks, not 1 steak. Okay, right. Because everything is going to go frickin' nuts. And it can happen really fast. If you look at other hyperinflations, like they can go, in a year, things can triple, can quadruple in price.
Yeah.
And I don't see a situation where this really doesn't happen.
But we saw that. But Mark, we saw it. It was less than 3 years ago. Remember when there's like runs on toilet paper, on all things, right. Literally prices went off the charts. We just lived through this.
We saw the behavior.
We saw the behavior. Literally, you would go into Walmart or whatever store, aisles are empty.
Yeah.
They empty the stores and prices went through the roof and you couldn't get it.
Yeah.
This can happen in a moment.
I bought toilet paper off a truck. Okay, right. So this is hilarious. There was no toilet paper anywhere.
Yes.
Okay. My family's like freaking out.
Yeah.
And I'm there outside of Shoppers Drug Mart. I see a truck pull in, and they're offloading toilet paper. I literally give the guy $100. I'm like, give me some toilet paper. No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
But that's the scarcity mentality that
But we have to remember, this was only a few years ago, and this can happen to everything.
Right.
This literally could happen to everything.
Yeah. So this is why I think. Again, I think something like this is inevitable. And you know who else thinks it's inevitable? The US government, the Canadian government. Everybody's actually been preparing for this.
Yes. RCMP's written reports on what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just want to give you...
Unfortunately, they redacted the good stuff.
Right.
We don't know what they say.
I want to give you a tangent, Mark, about what happened to me this week. So if I try to move money, even within a Canadian bank, even the same Canadian bank, like just moving money around is just a nightmare. And when I move anything like over $5,000 now, I get calls from the bank. They start asking me questions. So I thought, let me try something different. So I moved money from one of my Canadian accounts into PayPal. And I just want to see how long would it take PayPal to move it from a Canadian bank to PayPal and then back to another Canadian bank. Mark, they've held it for 11 days. So you start thinking about, why is Bitcoin going crazy? Like what? Because people are tired of this. Like you're holding my money hostage for 11 days for no reason. Like this is insanity. That's why people are like, we want DeFi. Like we've had enough of this nonsense.
That's also the biggest risk for Bitcoin. This is, so one of the things that I've studied is what happens to governments when they are under stress, under pressure, and it's not good, right? So a lot of people would be shocked to hear this. The United Kingdom, the UK, for over 20 years, would not let people take British pounds out of the country.
This is very common. A lot of countries do this.
No, a lot of countries do this.
A lot of countries do this.
But people would be shocked. It's like, really? That happened in England?
Yes.
I'm like, absolutely, it happened in England. The other thing happened in England that blows people's minds is that they started to tell farmers what to grow. And farmers who didn't grow what they wanted to grow were thrown off their own land. And ones that protested were shot. This happened in the 40s during the war. So like good countries. So again, the Grand British Empire was under tremendous stress during the war and after the war, where they lost all their colonies. And they were probably better to their citizens than Rome was or Imperial Spain was. But they were still brutal to their own people. So
can we go back, Mark? Because this is happening. So in Costa Rica, for example, I have a home in Costa Rica, do business in Costa Rica. I cannot exchange more than $2,000 of any currency in that country per month. And they do it because when I go to a bank, I got to show my passport. So they're controlling how much money I can just literally exchange from Canadian or US dollars. Like this can happen anywhere.
Yeah. So capital controls is a standard strategy that all countries do when they're under pressure. It happens every day.
Yes.
It just happened in Greece, happened in Cyprus. It's happened. I didn't know it was at Costa Rica, but it's going to happen everywhere.
Yeah.
You can absolutely expect capital controls here too, which means that you can't get your money out of the country.
Right.
It means that they're going to scrutinize every transaction that happens in the middle. And I think this is one of the big problems actually with Bitcoin. That's why, it's not bad to have some money, some value in Bitcoin. I wouldn't bet the farm on it. And the reason why is the government can crack down big time. And I don't think you can underestimate just how tough that can be. Like if they criminalize all the on-ramps and off-ramps and they say, you can't
Use
turn
Coinbase
your fiat.
or something,
Exactly. You can't turn your Bitcoin into fiat
Right.
or your fiat into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We're going to put a break there. And if you try to use your Bitcoin to buy from a business, if you're a business and you accept Bitcoin as payment, you'll go to jail.
Right.
Now, some will still continue to accept it. A lot of them be
they
like...
cracked down in China. They tried to crack it down in China.
Totally do that. We're not going to... We don't want to deal with that anymore, right? So, and I think the only thing that holds up Bitcoin is confidence. Bitcoin's not backed by anything.
Right.
It's not backed by a government.
Right.
It's not backed by gold or commodity. It's basically just backed by confidence.
Yes.
And more to the point, it's backed by Tether.
Yes.
And Tether can print trillions of Tether. And right now, the system is kind of working. But one day that confidence can go. And one of the things that could drop that confidence is if the government cracks down. That said, it's still worth holding some.
So Mark, can we talk about, because this has been very depressing so far, we're talking about inflation is really between 18 and 20%. Yeah. We're talking about the US dollars coming to the end. We're talking about the ridiculous prices we're paying for things. Let's talk about some solutions. What can somebody listening do today?
I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not ready for solutions yet. Because I'm not sure if people are convinced yet. Because I think we just got to the point where there's blocks now in the world.
Yes.
And people and countries are trading kind of within those blocks, and that's driving up inflation further.
Right.
The other thing to mention too that is more depressing is war. Right. Where you do have war that continues to escalate in Ukraine. Ukraine has lost the war. It doesn't matter. The West is determined to fight to the last Ukrainian, unfortunately, because they just want to hurt Russia as much as they can.
Yeah.
They've even admitted it. We just want to hurt Russia. We actually don't give a shit about Ukraine.
And they're not saying their own troops. They're just killing all the Ukrainians.
Yeah. And they literally said, that guy from South Carolina just says, we just want to hurt Russia. That's all. Yeah. That's all we want to do, right? Yeah. Which doesn't make the Russians feel very good. Yeah. And then you've got major saber rattling right now. So Taiwan just elected a new leader, and the new leader is we want to declare independence. So China's going bananas on that. So you've got the threat of war, which obviously drives inflation up further. So, hopefully people have realized now we already have stagflation, and we have a number of what are often called catalysts in the investor world, which are catalysts is a nice way of saying triggers that can drive things from going supernova. So we talked about a couple of things, solutions, things we can do. So if we can expect capital controls to happen, because it's happened everywhere else.
But it's already happening in Canada. I'm dealing with it every day.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right. I don't know if you call that quite, it is. I guess it's a form of capital control. It's kind of an internal capital control.
Yes.
But you won't be able to get your money out. So what can you do? Well, I hope you have bank accounts that are outside of Canada. Yes. If you don't, I have them all over the world.
But it's hard to get money from Canada or US into those bank accounts. They make it difficult.
Right now, it's not that difficult. It will soon be impossible. At some point, it will be impossible. Yeah. So I think everybody should take their step now. It's not that hard.
You can fly.
Yeah, I mean, you can go, for example, Dominican Republic,
Yes.
which is a non-CRS reporting country. You can go there and you have a letter from your bank. You can open up a bank account, actually at Scotiabank, which runs in DR.
Yeah.
You can open a bank account that day.
Yeah.
And they don't report and everything. It's
Yeah.
it's great. You can even like with used to do with HSBC. Now fortunately it's RBC, unfortunately, but they would even allow you to open up a bank account, remotely. So I think having bank accounts remotely makes sense.
I agree.
I think having payment services, you said like PayPal and whatnot, there's services like that all over the world.
Yes.
There's services like Kinesis that I use that allow for easy movement from fiat into gold into crypto any way you want.
Okay.
So you can get paid in crypto. You can buy gold with it. You can buy US dollars with it. You can buy Canadian dollars with it. And it's an internet. It's based in Australia and Indonesia. It's based elsewhere, right? So I think people have to think about what happens when movement of money gets restricted.
Yes.
And governments turn evil because that's what they always do. It's what happened in Rome. It's what happened in Spain, right? Where they go house to house, like literally house to house, looking for any food that you might have stored that they can tax, right? Yeah. That's what happens when governments are under pressure, and it's supported by a lot of the people.
Well, let's recall, Mark. Yeah. In Canada, when we were protesting these crazy government, crackdowns, and then they literally froze the bank accounts of all the people protesting. Like, think about that. This happened in Canada.
It is.
This was 2 years ago.
It is. It's absolutely true. No, and that is a real interesting data point. I happened to be at those protests.
Yeah, I'm sure you're worried about that.
And no, I drained all my bank accounts because I didn't know. They threatened. They said they weren't just going to target the leaders. They said anybody
they even donates
who donates.
Yes.
And they got that money. They got my name illegally by hacking.
Yes.
Give, send, go.
Yeah.
So government sponsored hackers got this list. Again, this is what governments do when they go crazy.
Yeah.
And this is just the history.
And we thought only China or Russia would do this. No, this is Canada.
No, Russia is a bastion of freedom compared to Canada.
Yes.
I know I know Russians who live here.
Yeah.
And they say you have no idea how good things are in Moscow. Like I actually want to go check out Moscow.
Yeah.
Because they
look, that's what Tucker Carlson just said. He's like, you got to see how beautiful and clean it is, and their economy is booming, and their dollar's strong. Like the total opposite of what we all thought was going to happen.
They have 17% taxes.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't have a problem with illegal immigration, which is another, big thing that's happening in the West, right?
Yes.
So we're under attack by our own governments, right? The governments are going crazy on taxation. Here in Canada, they've massively increased capital gains tax, which is like the best way to make a country poor.
Yes.
Is to
and
tax
drive out all the
investments.
entrepreneurs. Like who's going to incorporate a new company in Canada now with this new capital gains? Nobody.
Yeah.
Like it just makes no sense.
Yeah, it's brutal. So they're doing that. They're putting restrictions on moving money around.
Right.
And they're flooding the country with people who really shouldn't be here. So over 1 million people in the last 9 months have immigrated to Canada. 80% of those are undocumented illegal immigrants,
right,
including people from prisons in Haiti and Venezuela. They're dumping all those people and they're coming.
And it's why Canadians cannot get any health care. You can't get a family doctor anymore.
Right.
If you go to emergency in a hospital, it's about 22 hours wait. This is what they've done.
Yeah, it's bananas. So one solution is you need to internationalize your money, right? And just be prepared for when there's restrictions.
And maybe even think about getting another passport.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I actually don't have one, but that's one of the things that's absolutely on my shopping list.
Yeah.
Who knows how much that's going to protect us? But you know what? It's the kind of thing you've got to think about. You've got to be prepared
It's like
for.
Life insurance. These are just things we need to think about.
Yeah, and you can still, you can get one today. It's ranges from $10,000 to $100,000 depending on kind of where jurisdiction you're in and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's definitely a good idea. And maybe along with that is building your community is huge, right? So your local community, I think you've done a great job lately, with that, with your 75-day challenge or whatever. It's more than just, it's more than just a challenge. It's actually bringing people together socially.
That's important.
And when the shit hits the fan, you're like, hey,
who can you call?
These are like-minded people. I think the same thing. I think you need it local. You need it global too.
You're right.
So I like what you're doing in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Maintaining your relationships with people who are outside of the country.
You're right.
Again, that can save yourself. It's what saved my grandparents. It's how they got out of their hellholes.
Right.
All my 4 grandparents are refugees.
Yes, mine too.
They were not going to get out without knowing the right people who could shelter them, feed them, give them jobs, or whatever to get up on their feet.
That's right.
Because it sounds crazy today to think, well, Canada's amazing. It's an amazing first world country. Why would you ever want to leave?
Yeah.
But
that may have been true 8 years ago. That may have been true 8 years ago, but it's changed.
But a lot of these, Germany was a fantastic place at one point. Everybody had to leave,
Right.
So places can turn sour for a while, and you may not. You may not want to be there when things.
So, Mark, is there any good news? Is there, because we got to leave people not depressed?
I think we're talking about. I mean, So I think the good news is that there's a saying in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Right.
Right. So I think people who are prepared, like there's a guy named Hugo Stinnes who became the world's wealthiest man in Germany in 1923, and that's because he knew what was going on. He understood what was driving the inflation. And he was, he borrowed money, he bought coal mines, he bought factories, he bought other things, bought like productive things with it, and did very well. There are people, I know one of my friends that went to Argentina in 2002 and bought, basically $30 million worth of vineyards for like less than $1 million.
Right.
Literally had to go down with suitcases of cash in order to do it because the banks were non-functional in Argentina at the time.
You're right.
So people who are aware of what's going on, like if you have hard assets, if you have good relationships, for example, if you grow your own food and you have community, that's another thing we should talk about. Like we're talking about, having our own chickens. Backyard chickens are a great thing. I do
think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, it provides the healthiest food there is.
Yeah. My neighbor, I watched my neighbors do it during COVID, and they've kept that for a few years, and I'm inspired to do it myself now.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
It's cool.
But there are opportunities. When the shit's hitting the fan, the great opportunities. So there's an office building that sold in St. Louis about 5 weeks ago. It was last sold 18 years ago for $280 million. This is the tallest, most beautiful office building in St. Louis. They call it Class A building. So it was last sold 18 years ago for $280 million. You could have bought it 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago for $3.5 million. So in crazy times like now, there's some incredible opportunities.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I remember getting, I wish I did this, but I got an email from a friend of mine during the COVID time, like 2020, 2021, when really at the depths of the real estate market. And he was buying mansions in Detroit for $9,000.
Right.
And I saw pictures of them. I mean, they look like crack houses, and they probably were. But you know what? When you're buying things for $9,000, it's hard to lose too much. And then like 3 years later, selling them for $35,000, still not a lot, but a huge return from 9K. So if you do have some liquidity, what can you do? First, I think you need to have a side hustle. You need to have something other than your core job or even your core business, right? So we don't do jobs anymore. Like nobody will hire us.
Yeah, nobody will hire us.
Like
we're unhireable.
We're unhireable people.
Yeah.
But we have a core business, right? You have a core business in real estate.
Yeah.
I've got a core business in CEO coaching. But we've got these interesting side businesses, including this one, which by the way, you should hit the like and subscribe button and help out the algorithm because this is becoming a business.
Yeah, and we're so grateful. 50,000 people viewed our stuff last week, and we didn't maybe ask you to subscribe, but we'd like to ask you to subscribe because we're building a community, and Mark's actually having a party. And if you're a subscriber, you might get invited to Mark's party, which is coming up. So we do encourage you to subscribe. We look forward to meeting you in person as well.
That's interesting. Never did a video invitation before, but that's a two-step process. So you're right. You got to apply.
Yeah, we'll see.
If you're, if you're cool enough, and you've made a commitment to your own sustainability and success. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Would love to host more people.
Yeah.
So what else? So we've got so side hustle because you do need to earn more money, and it's not just earning more money. It's also the learning that you get. It's also learning that you get in different businesses. It's the new connections that you make.
Yeah.
Because you never know, again, when things turn south, you don't know who that right connection is, whoever has the right skill set that can really help you. So it makes sense. And you know what? I know a lot of people now, they really are doing 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Yes.
And normally I would advocate for, extreme focus.
Yeah.
This might be a time that actually rewards diversity as opposed to just focusing on one thing.
I have one positive thing. Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of really scary things that you'll never read about in the general papers. We're going to election year. 3/4 of the world are going into election year. So you're not going to hear about the reality of what's going on. But the most exciting thing that I've ever seen in my life is AI. And if you look at what happened just last week with Chat GPT 4.0, it's mind-blowing. I had a marketing agency, and we had 3 offices. We had one in Las Vegas, we had one in Florida, one in Toronto. I can be more productive in a single day today just using ChatGPT 4.0 than all of my people combined, just by myself. It's literally, every time I use it, Mark, I'm like, this is insane. I can't believe it. So I think that is the most exciting opportunity. But I meet people every day, Mark, and they've never used ChatGPT. And I'm like, what? Like, you are so smart and intelligent, but you just told me that. And I'm like, wow, that's so sad. Like, people are afraid of getting out of their comfort zone and trying something new. This technology is as important as electricity. You need to be using it. So I think that's the bright spot of our times.
Yeah. You know, honestly, you'll notice I've been smiling through this whole episode. I'm not that, okay. Am I worried? Sure. But I'm also excited because I see that this is an opportunity for incredible wealth creation and other value. Not just making money, it's building amazing relationships with people.
Building communities.
The world's going through a change.
Yes.
It needs to. Okay, the world is like super unsustainable right now. It needs a reset.
It does. It's happening.
So you might as well be prepared for it. And you're absolutely right about AI. You need to learn how to use this stuff. A lot of it, honestly, because it's not infallible. Okay,
Right.
ChatGPT and all of its ilk make mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
And so by understanding what it does well, what it doesn't do well, you can be on the right side of it. And absolutely, it is an opportunity for massive wealth creation. Everybody, I think we need to do a whole episode on AI and kind of where it's going, what to do with it. But no, I agree. No, this is. I don't see this as depressing. I just think this is understanding reality. This is the reality. This is what's happening. The reality is we're in stagflation already. The reality is there's several catalysts that can turn this supernova. There are a lot of people who will be poorer, even if they have a bigger bank account, because inflation has made, has they're making 20% more from their jobs, even though the prices are up 100%.
Yeah.
This stuff is happening. You might as well understand what's happening, why it's happening. And these are all things that you can do to get on the right side of it. If you're building new relationships, you're building community. If you have a side hustle, you're getting more money. If you're saving in gold, silver, Bitcoin, if you've got bank accounts that are elsewhere in the world, you are better positioned than 99% of other people.
And the fact that you're watching this today, you could be watching anything. You could be listening to anything. The fact that you are listening to our program, you're a 1%er. And a lot of people, what the media will tell you is, oh, interest rates are going to be falling. Let me tell you, I've been telling people since this started, that's delusional. You can't print $1 trillion every 100 days. You can't have inflation continue to rise no matter how they manipulate the statistics and interest rates falling. So this is the new normal, according to Jeff Rubin.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that if your business plan, if your key to financial success is waiting for the interest rates to go down, don't hold your breath for that.
Yeah, I think Japan offers a lesson as to what's going to happen. Because, I mean, Japan is like kind of controlled by the global system. It does whatever the global system wants. And what they have is called yield curve control. And that's likely to happen here. So what Jeff Rubin is talking about, right, is that as inflation is going up, people who buy bonds, like long-term bonds, are not willing to lend the government money for 30 years and get 5%, even 5% return. Actually, it's probably now it's like 4.9 or whatever. They're demanding more. They're like, if I'm going to lend you this money, I want 8%, I want 9%. It's pushing those rates up. As those rates go up, the economy goes down south, and governments don't like that, and they put pressure on central banks. They do something. So the central banks go and they push where they have control is in the short-term interest rates. So they push those down. So
by buying those bonds.
So then what do you got? You've got a curve that's too steep.
Yes.
And that doesn't work. So what they've done in Japan and why they're effed, all right, is that they are borrowing money short, which they're printing all this money short, and then they're buying long-term bonds to now the point where the Japanese government owns well over 50% of all their debt. So which means that interest rates can't go up because they pay more in interest. It can't go down because people sell the yen.
Yeah.
So basically the yen is dead. it's over, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be able to get amazing deals in Japan. Talk about real estate. You want to buy good real estate? I'd buy real estate in Tokyo, especially if it goes down south.
But
further.
Canada's doing some of the same things. Like we're not at 50% yet, but Canada is printing money to buy its own bonds. Like this is just insanity. And the US is doing the exact same thing.
And as soon as it goes over 50%, we're in the same situation.
Yes.
And again, that's when the reset is going to happen. And the question is, what kind of reset are we going to get, right? And there's a number of different options that can happen. The one that the system is preparing for is, you've probably heard of CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. So every government in the world, every central bank is experimenting with these things.
Australia's already
China already has one. The UN already is. So these are actually very scary things. Actually, a number of economists said once this happens, a lot of freedom is gone out of
all
society.
Your freedom's gone. Yeah.
Which is probably why it's going to happen.
Yes.
So these are basically they're digital dollars, but it's not like the dollars that's in PayPal or the dollars that you see when you go to your online bank. They're issued by the central bank. They're issued by the Bank of Canada. They're issued by the Federal Reserve, and it's programmable money. So they can basically say this money can only be spent within a 20-mile radius of your house. This money can only be spent on essentials. You can't buy alcohol with it. God forbid.
They control everything.
No firearms.
You can't drive more than 2 kilometers from your house because all of a sudden you can't get gas or whatever
you
you decide.
Certainly can't buy chickens to go have your own eggs.
Right.
So like it's very scary because it's controllable at a central level.
We already saw this. Again, look at Canada or look at Australia during COVID, how they gave these restrictions. Do you remember in Toronto where I could go to Oakville to go dine in a restaurant? But yet if I was on this side, Mississauga, I couldn't. They did this already to us.
But that was hard to enforce.
Right.
Now it's easy.
It's easy to enforce.
They just put it right into money.
Right.
And especially if you've got high inflation, one of the things that they could do is say your money expires. So if you don't spend the money within a month, then it goes away. Right.
Incredible.
So all kinds of things that they can do. So they essentially can use it to make negative interest rates.
Yes.
So negative interest rates is the craziest idea ever.
Yes.
Imagine being paid to borrow money.
Wow.
It's like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It really doesn't work because then all you do is like if I charged you money for that, right? You'll be like, well, I'm just going to save it in cash at home. I'm not going to.
Right. Well, I give it to you. Right. Yes.
So that's probably a big reason for why the push is for CBDCs.
Yes.
But that is,
it's coming.
I think that's what one outcome is going to be, where everyone has a digital ID. It's tied to central bank digital currency. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's all out there.
This is happening already.
It's all out there in the public domain.
Yeah.
That's one way to do a reset.
Yeah.
And again, that's probably something you want to protect
and
yourself
it starts, and how it's going to start is they'll say, oh, your driver's license is now, it's on your phone.
Right.
Oh, your passport's now on your phone. You go, oh, it's so convenient. How great is that? Well, that's the next step.
I'm Mark Organ. I'm co-host of The Best Half Show, all about how to make the second half of your life 10 times better than your first. I've been a successful software as a service company CEO. I've created companies like Eloqua and Influitive. And today I help category defining software company CEOs generate massive success in their businesses. You can find out more about me at categoryknots.com. And if you qualify, you get a free 45-minute session with me. I'll generate a lot of value for you right in that session. And if we hit it off, maybe you'll be a client. Yeah. Or if you want to get this free money.
Right.
So next time when they want to give you $3,000 of COVID money.
Or if the government owes you money, it'll probably be on your CBDC.
And they're going to say, well, we're going to give it to you in terms of CBDC. If you don't want CBDC, then you don't get the money. So everybody's going to go and sign up for it and have this sort of digital account.
Yeah.
But again, that's the end of freedom and you want to protect yourself against that. So that's one form of reset. Another one is where China and Russia just pulled the plug. One day they pulled the plug and they're like, we have a new currency. They're working on it. They actually have a conference.
And it's public. They talk about this.
They have a conference in the next 2 weeks. So there's a very eminent economist named Sergei Glaziev in Russia. He proposed a few months ago a new type of currency that basically is an amalgam of several different things, including gold, oil, the ruble, the rupee, the yuan, okay, maybe even agriculture like wheat and other stuff like that, maybe even Bitcoin.
Right.
But it's basically a basket of stuff. Okay, so like when Rubin goes and says, oh, or Dahlia says they're going to go to the yuan as a reserve currency. No, they won't. It's going to be part of something that like no one's going to go. The yuan is just as much bullshit as the dollar is.
It is, yeah.
But if you have something that's backed by real things, if you've got gold and you've got crude oil in there,
Yes,
that could
those
really
are real
work.
things.
So they could pull the plug on a dollar and say, for now on, all the transactions, you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you want to buy like bullshit from China,
Yes.
You've got to buy it in terms of whatever this new thing is going to be called.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a stable coin, so it's going to have
Right.
a lot of properties that Bitcoin has, but better,
Right.
Because Bitcoin is slow as shit. But this thing is actually built on a new financial infrastructure.
Right.
This could be launched within the next year.
Yeah.
And that's another way. That's another way that you could have a reset.
Yeah.
And the third, I think, which is the most remote possibility, is that things actually decline so quickly that basically the US dollar just goes kaput and people go to Bitcoin or gold or something
Right.
like that. Unlikely. It's
Yeah.
more likely to have a smooth transition into something.
Yeah.
One way or another, though, like a reset is absolutely coming.
It's happening.
There's
It's
no
happening.
doubt about
Yeah.
it. And we got to prepare. And the good news is it's actually not that hard to prepare. We talked about a few things to do.
Mark, can I just end off with some positive
Yeah.
things? Look, we can't control what's external to us. We can control ourselves. You can get up at 5 a.m. You can go exercise. You can get yourself in a great state of mind. You can eat healthy food, and you can do the hardest thing you've got to do every day. You can win every day. And as long as you're getting this kind of information and information from the right people, and you stop trusting state-run media and all the nonsense they're trying to pollute our brains with just isn't true, you're going to succeed. And just learning AI and leveraging AI, you're going to be superhuman. So you could be superhuman physically and mentally. And I think that AI is a great way that people can deal with all this.
Yeah, I mean, let's put a bunch of these things together, right? Get in shape, build your community, okay? Make friends and stuff around you, take care of the people around you, learn next generation skills. I think AI is one of several things to work on, right? But have a foot firmly in the future as opposed to the past. Internationalize yourself, right? Don't have a single point of failure kind of in your life. You're going to be ahead of 99% of people, and you could come out of the other side of this. Again, I think it's going to be hard times. I don't think we should sugarcoat that.
No, it's going to be difficult.
But the other side could be glorious, right? There are people that have done incredibly well through crises because they are
That's
prepared.
usually where all the great fortunes are made.
True.
But one last thing I just want to say, sometimes you've got to change your friends. I have friends that are stuck with some old ideas. Because I've been in the real estate business for 40 years, I've obviously developed some friends, and they're convinced like, oh no, it's going to be this way, and they don't understand. So sometimes you do need to change some friends to get some fresh ideas, because some of your friends are stuck to their old ideas and they're going to be wiped out.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll make some new friends here on this channel. We really would appreciate some comments. If you've liked anything we said, or even don't like some things we've said, comment. We will respond to it. We'd love to have you in our community. So,
and maybe Mark will invite you to his party.
Maybe I'll invite you to a party. All right.
Thanks very much.
Let's wrap it up. Cheers.
Thank you so much.